Hi, everybody. Welcome to Literary Tuesdays. I'm your host, Marilyn Alexander. I'm a publisher and the founder of Destined to Publish. Destined to Publish is a Christian based, independent, hybrid publishing company with a focus on literary coaching. We have almost 20 years in the publishing industry, and soon we will celebrate the milestone of publishing our 400th author. And our authors are both nationally and abroad. Our goal with each and every one of our authors is to take them by the hand and walk them step by step on their publishing journey. Because I believe more than anything else that just because you're self-publishing does not mean you have to publish by yourself. And so we are in the third week of March, and I hope you have enjoyed the wonderful books that we brought you in our past Tuesdays. And tonight is no different because we are highlighting books that are just really good reads. These are books that are short stories or novels that will capture your imagination and cause you to just curl up and turn from one page to the next. And so tonight's author is just that type of a book. This book is called Life-Changing Journeys, and it is by Sharon Mangum. I promise you, you will not put it down. Let's take a listen to our conversation. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, good evening.
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. And yourself?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me today. And so we're just going to get right into it, and we're going to talk about life-changing journeys. But first, I want you, or can you tell our audience a little something about Sharon Mangum?
Okay, well, I'm a care professional. I've been in the field for over 30 years. I was a primary care provider for a number of years, and recently I've gone to the administrative side. I shouldn't say I am an internist / geriatrician. I stayed in office practice for a number of years, and then I worked as an administrator within the healthcare field for several years. And after that, I decided I wanted to go back to the clinical side, and I did that for about another 5 to 10 years. And then this last 5 years, I've been on the administrative side, reviewing cases for an insurance company, helping them to decide when certain tests are medically necessary. And that allows me to work from home, which is good, because if I was still in practice, I would have to get out in the snow and ice and see patients in the office. So this is good. This time of life is good to be able to work from home with COVID and everything else that's going on. So
that was kind of perfect, where you were able to do that even before COVID, and now the reason and be able to stay at home. That is actually perfect.
Yeah,
so,
it worked out well.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say it worked out really well, because when I switched over to doing administrative work, who knew? That was 5 years ago. We didn't even know COVID was on the horizon, or any of the other challenges that we would have, working from the office. So.
Yeah, and that the interesting part, I think, and I think this is part of I won't tell your story, but COVID allowed us to do a whole lot of things, and then it stopped us from doing a whole lot of things. So can you tell us, first, how did you get started in writing? What made you think, wow, I want to write a book? Or did it start out as wanting to write a book? How did that actually happen?
I was on call one day. I came home from work. I was really tired and exhausted. And the scenario where you're tired, but you're too tired to rest, like you can't get to sleep comfortably because of the fatigue. Yes. So I thought, well, I could look at TV, or I could veg out on potato chips, which I used to do a lot. And I thought, let me just sit down. And I was at the desktop, and I just opened, one of the screens, and I just started thinking about, the different suspense stories that I had read. the suspense movies that I had read, and I had often told other people, that ending should have been a lot different. And I thought about it, I was like, well, let me start, to see what maybe I could, come up with. And I thought about characters. I didn't know what they were going to actually end up doing, but after I named them, it started to write itself. When you name something, it takes characteristics. So when you put a label to a character, that label starts to define who they are, what they're going to do, and how they fit into the scheme of any story that you might write.
Yes.
And so when you hear people say, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next while I'm writing this, you wonder if they're being, accurate or true, or if they're just pulling your leg. And so when I started writing, I actually understood that, because sometimes when I would stop, I would think to myself, oh, I wonder what so-and-so is doing. And I wonder what's going to happen next. And you actually don't know what's going to happen until you sit down and you start typing. And again, the characters tell you what they're going to do based on how they've developed thus far. And it's a form of entertainment for you. And it was actually entertaining for me, because I was like, wow, so this person did that. Well, I wonder how this other character is going to take that,
Yes.
And it's so much fun. You're writing it, but the story is telling you, and the characters are telling you how it should unfold.
What they're going to say and have. I love that. Now, did you start out writing a novel, or because this is actually a book of short stories? It's almost like a novella, like a book of short novellas. So was that your original goal, to write short stories, or were you thinking, okay, I'm going to write one story? How did it develop into a book of short stories versus a novel?
Well, it started out, just as my writing, and then I thought, I'm going to write a novel. But as the events unfolded, I realized this story can actually be told in a shorter version. It doesn't have to go, like 200 pages, because the characters were moving so fast, until I realized that the goal of the story was going to be achieved a lot sooner than it would take if you were going to sit down and write a 200-page novel. So
now, that is so wise. I'm sorry, I cut you off, but that is so wise, because some people don't understand that. And so you can finish the book and really have a great experience, but then be dragged along the process of the story, because, as you said, the story developed a lot sooner. And I think authors really need to understand when their story should stop, and then versus pulling the audience along to make it a bigger book.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is really wise that you did that.
Thank you.
And so this is actually a book of 7 stories. What was your favorite?
Initially, my favorite was the first one, because there was so much tongue-in-cheek humor, which I love, by the way. But by the time I was on the 5th story, I looked back and I realized that The Fabulous Frederica was my favorite story, because of the humanity and the circumstances that allowed the character to grow and realize that his initial goals and aspirations weren't necessarily what he wanted to do. And he didn't find that out until, well, I don't want to get ahead of the story, and I don't want to tell too
Don't
much.
give it away.
But after I got to that story, in retrospect, I look back and that was actually my favorite.
I love that. I love, well, first, let me just say, I enjoyed, this is a book of 7 short stories, and I enjoyed each one of them tremendously. And I will agree with you. The tongue in cheek in Dr. Harambe's Revenge is really, really, really clever in the way that you wrote it. And I guess the sentimentality of the fabulous Federico, those characters were kind of tugging at your heart more. So I really enjoyed just the way that you developed their relationship together, the relationship between a man and his dog. I really enjoyed the fact that that they had that type of relationship, and I'm not going to give it away, but it does let everybody, all of our viewing audience, know that there is a story in this book for everybody, and everybody will find something in it that they will relate to in every story. Yeah. So, question.
Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's very true, because one of my friends read it and told me that was what he liked about it, that it was diverse to the point that the characters were of different backgrounds, different ages, and that she bought the book for her nieces and nephews, because even though there is only one story about an adolescent in the whole book, she felt like they would be able to relate to each story. So,
and enjoy each story thoroughly. And that is, definitely a credit to you as a writer, that you were able to achieve that, because not every author can do that. So essentially, that is a great quality in, for you as a writer and in the book. But I also want to highlight the fact that each story has, and I'll show it on the front cover, each story has a signpost, and the characteristics, I don't know if that's the right term I want to use, but the characteristics of the story are written on the signpost. Were your characteristics, did you discover them? Let me give a couple of examples so that our audience will know what we're talking about. So like the fabulous Federico, the characteristics in that particular story are growth and self-realization. And then for another story, there's integrity. For another story, there's growth and wisdom. But then it's not just those types of morals. We also have greed and kidnapping. And there's another one in here, legacy and greed. So did those write themselves, or did you discover that they were a thread after you wrote each story?
I discovered the thread afterward. Okay. And that's pretty interesting to me, because a physician who their colleagues read it, that what they noticed was that there was a moral code throughout each story. I hadn't thought about it, but it was important to me to write a story where it was obvious that good was going to prevail over evil, because I think a lot of entertainment now, we have protagonists that in former days would have been considered villains. So yes. I wanted to try to make it clear in the story that the good in the story ultimately prevailed over whatever malevolent forces were in play.
That is phenomenal. And like I said, the each story grabs you, and the endings are really, really good. Like every ending is really, and I'm not going to say anything about them, but I want to ask you, what was the hardest story to write? Or was there a hard story?
I think the hardest story, and the one that I couldn't quite grasp the way I could the others, was What's for Dinner, Mark?
Yes.
I love to go to restaurants. I'm not a chef. I have no background in any kind of food cuisine, culinary arts, nothing. But it came to me one night, and we spoke about this, in the class, about when you get an idea, rather than think you're going to remember it when you wake up the next day, have your little notepad and write it down. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and it came to me that I was supposed to write a story about a chef whose main entree or his major ideal for a dish is going to be stolen. Now, I just figured, well, this must be divine incentive, because
yes,
I just don't know anything about it. But after I got started, it was like I was trying to put too much detail into what was supposed to transpire, and there was not enough dialogue to move the story along. And sometimes you can try and put too much fact into explaining what a person does and what an event entails until it just reads like a textbook. And that was how the story was starting to read. The characters didn't have a lot of dialogue. I was trying to explain about the different awards that you can get, when you're in the culinary field. And thank goodness that one of the coaches said, right here, you probably need to tell this part of the story more as dialogue, as opposed to just telling people what these awards are and how this works and so forth. So I think that was the most difficult one.
And the theme of that story is integrity, and we can see why that theme is integrity. And yes, you are absolutely right. That is one of the things that we try to hammer is don't think you're going to remember anything. Write everything down. Write everything down. So Sharon, I really want to find out what was the most inspiring thing or surprising thing that you learned? What was the most surprising thing that you learned about Sharon while you were writing your book?
I think that I didn't know that once I get beyond the first story, which is, science-based to a certain degree, that I would be able to develop a plot that would go beyond any kind of math or technical or science-based skills. And so by the time I get to What's for Dinner, Mark, I was amazed that I could even think about what might happen to a chef who is developing, an entree, and what the circumstances might be. And interestingly enough, the other story, Lightning Strikes, Lightning Strikes Twice or whatever. Notice I'm having to.
Yes, but, lightning strikes. Lightning strikes.
Okay. I've never been bullied to the degree that it happens in that story. And, bullying is a lot more pervasive than it is now, because there is, different levels in terms of technology, social media, things of that nature. And so for me to imagine what it might be like now was an eye-opener for me to realize that humanity is basically the same, no matter, how technically advanced we become. Thoughts and the circumstances of man's inhumanity to man basically are the same. So if I write a story about bullying now, and I reflect on what bullying was like when I was growing up, the underlying themes are basically the same. Someone who is, bigger than someone else who they perceive to be inferior or smaller, or for whatever reason, sets the table or sets the scenario for that type of interaction to play out. And so it surprised me that I could write that story. But then I thought about it, and I was like, when we were growing up, you could be bullied, but it was on a different level.
Yeah.
Now, even when people are bullied, it's basically the same, thing. Someone feels inferior And so they try to deflect their shortcomings or their sense of inferiority onto someone else who they perceive is smaller or unable to defend themselves or has some other deficiency. So
So I think that that is wonderful, because not only did that surprise you that you were able to imagine these topics, but and imagine that you could write them, but imagine that you could write them well. So that is even more of a feat, because it doesn't sound in your writing, it doesn't sound like you struggled to write any of these topics. It really sounds like they came with ease.
some of them did, but not all of them. And I prey on things that are a struggle, and so I think that's why a lot of it comes across as being easy. Because I with the fabulous Frederico, I actually hit a point where I wasn't quite sure if I should end the story at a certain point, and I won't say where
No,
that point was. And I prayed on it, but then my husband said to me, "No, no, it can't end there. You have to realize that that particular character has more to do, and that character won't be fully realized until you let them come out ahead of the game."
Wow.
And so at the point where I would have ended it, the two characters would have been, they're off of them. They would no longer be homeless. And I
Yeah.
hope I'm not telling too much. They would not have triumphed.
Yes.
And they actually triumphed at the end. And where I had ended it, they would have been better than where they started out at. But they would not have achieved the things that they achieved at the end of the story.
No, that is phenomenal. And so I am, wow, I told you 30 minutes was going to go really, really quick. So we're down to the last couple minutes, and there's so much more I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is, what would you say to the audience, to someone who wanted to pick up a book like Life Changing Journeys? What was your goal for the reader to experience when they picked up your book?
I wanted people to be able to sit down and have a good laugh, if you will, and not have to worry about, is it going to be so technical that I'm going to have to look up words, or is it going to be more than I want to be involved in at that time? Like, if you only have a few minutes, you can read one story in a few minutes. And told me that they thought they were just going to read one story and put it down. And they sat down the rest of their Saturday and read the whole book, because after they read one story, they were like, "Oh, can you read this next one?" And so I think if you want to be entertained and you're looking for a story that is going to also be morally enlightening and uplifting, I think it's uplifting. Nobody dies. Nobody is killed, even though they try in the first story. But everybody ends up better off than they were in the first story. So everybody evolves, and they're better off than when you first meet them.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Now, one last question, and I think this I would be remiss if I don't mention the fact that you went through our coaching program. So you went through literary coaching with Kara. Tell us about your experience and the coaching process for you in developing your book and developing your storyline. How did that help you in the process of your writing?
I think it helped me in terms of discipline, because if I had not been in the program, who knows how much longer it would have taken those next 6 stories to evolve for me to write them. But because we were meeting on a regular basis, and you had to actually say, where you're at and what's your next step in terms of, getting a finished product, it made me actually stay on schedule, and by the end, I had a book. Now, if I hadn't gone through the program, I can honestly say that probably wouldn't have happened. Maybe I would have had a book a year later as opposed to months later.
Yes.
And so I think that part was good. Something else I want to emphasize is that we were told to do research earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say how important that is, because what happened to me, even though my stories were fictional, they still needed to be factual and true to life. And some of the circumstances that occurred in the Fabulous Frederico, even after editing, I had to go back and you know this, Marilyn, I had to go back and kind of clarify some things because I didn't do as much research as I should have done initially on. And that was because I was just so excited about getting my ideals onto paper. And it's good to get your ideals on paper. And it's, you know, good to develop your story, but the facts within a fictional story still have to make sense.
Yes.
And you probably know what I'm talking about. I don't want to ruin the story, but there's one particular instance where for Fred, I have to go back and clarify something because people were wondering, if that happened, how is Fred still here?
Yes, I do remember that. I do remember that. Absolutely. And the hilarious part that we can laugh about is that, you know, those things are what make the memories of writing so wonderful. The fact that you can look back on these small things and say, wow, you know, from here, and these were the kind of things I had to experience in the writing process. So one more question, Sharon, maybe two, if I have time.
Mm-hmm.
If you were able to get your book in front of one person, have you ever thought about that? Who would it be?
Oh, yes. Oprah Winfrey. Because Oprah she was an influencer before influencing became a thing on social media. And if Oprah said something was good, people would run out and buy it. You know, Oprah's favorite things has generated, you know, untold revenue for people. And who knows, she may not even like short stories, but if Oprah read the book and she liked it, well, you know, from there, I would probably be on, I would be listed, what is it, her book club?
As a number one bestseller, yes. Yes.
Would probably be listed as one of the books that they would review for the book club. And, you know, from there, it would all be frosting on the cake, you know.
Yes.
So.
And so if you were to have one piece of advice or inspiration, because the goal of this video is really to bring emphasis to your book, but it's also to inspire. So what would you say to people or a person who's out there who's thinking, I think I want to write, but I'm not sure? What piece of advice could you give to them?
I would say, you know, just get started, because, you know, if you think you can, and you know the old adage, if you think you can, you can. If you don't think you can, you probably won't.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just a matter. And see, I had started on a whim. You know, I didn't think I was going to write, you know, a short story. But if you think you want to write, you're that much further ahead of the game, because you already know that it's something you want to do. See, I wasn't sure. I was just, you know, I'm not going to eat potato chips tonight, or I'm not going to, you know, just sit in front of the TV. And I've wandered into it. But if you already know, I say, you know, sit down at your laptop, think about, I think it's important to think about what it is you want to write, and what is your goal. Like for me, I was just, you know, wanting to, like I said, decompress. And as I got started, I thought, oh, this could be entertaining for other people. It's entertaining for me. So, you know, do you want to educate someone? Do you want to entertain people? Do you want to give them instructions toward, you know, better lifestyle? And so once you decide what it is you want to do, and you channel your energy toward researching, how to go about that, then I think you're probably, at least 25 to 50% of the way there. And if you want to write, I think that's, a major part of getting started right there.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. And Sharon, thank you so much for being a part of our broadcast tonight and being such an inspiration. And like Sharon said, if you know you're ready to write, just get started. And a part of the process of getting started is to go to our website, which is destinedtopublish.com. Pick up or click on that Let's Talk link. Send us some information and let's talk. Let's get you started. And for those of you who are ready for publishing, we also have our Destined to Publish Authors Conference. And it is coming up Saturday, April the 23rd, 2020. It is a full day of a live webinar that will take you from beginning all the way through to the end, from getting your thoughts from your brain to the paper, to having your finished book in hand and what to do with it when you get there. So once again, head over to our website, destinedtopublish.com, click on that Authors Conference hyperlink, and see you at the Destined to Publish Authors Conference. Sharon, thank you so much for spending this time with me this evening. It was such a wonderful.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And I don't want to be remiss, because this is a book that everyone can pick up. Life-Changing Journeys by Sharon Mangum. It is on Amazon.com. Don't wait. Don't pass go. Go to Amazon right now and pick up your copy of Life-Changing Journeys. You will not regret it. The reads in here are phenomenal, and it is a page turner. And like Sharon said, it will have you going from one story to the other. Thank you, Sharon. All right. Have a good day.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you too.